You know, today is going to be more of a kickoff day. We just want to kind of get started and talk about some of the things that we really want to instill in you guys. We do, whether the contractor gives you one or not, they should. But what I would like to see you guys, all of you, ever step onto a job site is make sure you have a pair of gloves and make sure you have a pair of safety glasses. If you cut anything, bang anything, twist anything, or do anything, especially above your head without a pair of safety glasses, you get something in your eye, you're not going to say, oh man, that's going to take a while to heal. I mean, it's your vision, and that's a very, very important thing. So does anybody know what some of these tools are in these classes? Does everybody know what? As I pull these tools out, why don't we go ahead and start taking them apart, open, taking the things out. Does anybody know what this is? What do you do? Of course, we all know what screwdrivers are. Screwdrivers are for. Does anybody know what these are? Has anybody ever used these before? Actually, these are called Lyman Pliers. These are your everyday tools. This is, you use this to cut the wire. You can actually use it to strip the wire. There's an art to that. We use these to twist. It's called, field terminology is called twisting the joint. We terminate the wires together and put the wire nut on there. And there's something right here, there's some grooves right here, these teeth. You're supposed to grab something right here. These are used to grip onto a fish tape. Inspector. So, tell them what you did.
Okay. First off, I've been in the contracting business since I'm really 19 years old. I did my first cabinet job solo when I was 19. But the point is that in this business, okay, you will learn what you choose to learn, where you feel comfortable. I've been through every phase of the building business. I can build a house from start to finish. I don't need anyone, which means I do the foundation, I do the concrete, I lay brick, I build fireplaces, I frame a house, I sheathe the house, right on down the line. I've done every single phase. I've learned it. And hopefully each and every one of you in your lifetime will do the same thing. Learn different phases of the construction business. I've always told my two sons, if you're gonna go into the construction business, be a plumber or an electrician.
How many people have used a tape measure in their life? How many people know how to use a tape measure? Like, the question is,
How do you read a tape measure?
not you guys, young guys. How many quarters are in an inch? Does anybody know that? How many quarters are an inch? 4. How many sixteenths are an inch? 16. Remember, if someone's teaching you something and you don't know something, that person didn't know until somebody taught them what this is. That's what this is. Has anybody ever used a pipe bender? Does anybody have any construction experience? Has anybody ever actually worked on a job site in any facet of any trade? Doing what?
Swinging hammers.
Why you?
I worked with conduit and I did some ballasts, some lights.
You can actually hook a piece of pipe into a bender?
Yeah, but the 6-inch thing always.
Well, I mean, can you actually lock the pipe under the bender?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I think
That's the first step.
I'm a business owner, and I have to rely on my people. Not only do I have to find the work, I have to sell the work, and then I have to set the work up and say, here you go. Please do it right. And we talked about this before, but how many people know what this is? Young guys. Anybody know what this is? This is a fish tape. And what you do is, you take this piece, when you run the conduit, which we will get into that, after you run on your conduit, you push this through the pipe down to your partner, and your partner hooks the wire onto it, and you pull it back in, and reel it back in. And this thing, it's amazing how long these things last, actually. If you treat it to it right, it's going to last a very long time. I'll tell you, does anybody know what a plumb bob is? A plumb bob is a big weight with a point on the end of a string. And you have a roll of string, and you make all your measurements where your high bay lights are gonna be on the ground, and your guy's up there in the scaffold, and you say to him, you're trying to make that mark, a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, and get it right on there, and he's got his string, and he makes that mark in the ceiling, and that's where he's gonna hang the light. What's my plumb bob laser? I was like, what do you mean? He showed it to me. I've never seen that before. Then you know what it's used for. Splicing your wires together, and especially when you have a whole job site full of boxes, and you gotta splice all your wires together, you take your nail apron, you put your yellows on one side, your red on the other, you put your Kleins and your strippers and your screwdriver in your pocket, and you get up there and screw this on there and move on to the next one. Outcome tools, right? They run your pipe and you run your conduit and your boxes, and what you do is you take your drill, and the drill has a hammer function on it, so it kind of does this as it's spinning, so it chip into the concrete. So you got this tool that has a drill bit on it, a concrete bit, with a tool on the end of it. So you pull the tool off, drill your hole, you put the tool back on, and on the end of it, it's a 5/16 nut driver. So you slam it on there, you put the screw on there, whip. So basically it's drill, put the piece on there, put the tab con on there, back in the, and in the electrical, you know, it's to cut metal. Metal tubing, metal rods, small pieces of box channel.
I cut wood with it too.
You're only gonna get one cut. Usually on a hacksaw blade, the blade faces down. The cut is down, and when you pull, you're cutting down. Cut, 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 cut. This, if you notice, it says 24/12. What's the 12?
24 teeth per 12 inches.
That's right.
But for cutting metal conduit, you wanna have a 32 tooth blade, which,
Now, I use straight cloth for a number of reasons. First, one time it saved my life sliding it down a roof. When I'm pulling nails, if you're pulling a 16 penny or a 20 penny nail, you can bend it. You can't do it with a curved hammer. If it's the wrist, it works. If it don't, it tires you out, you can't work.
does anybody know what these two holes are for right here?
Wire. Picking wire.
You cut screws with them. Our basic trade screws, some of the basic trade screws is a 1632 and an 832. 1632, or I'm sorry, 632 is, you know, when you put a plate on an outlet or a switch and the little screw that holds the plate on, that's a 632. And like on a box, a metal box, which I'll bring in, you hold the plate on that, that's an 832. And sometimes, you know, they come out kind of long and you gotta cut them. And this is a crimp, which is used to, you know, like they're called stay-cons, you know, the fork connectors that you would crimp onto the end of a wire, that you put under a screw. Well, you gotta crimp that on the wire, and that's what these are for. See, if you look at this one, these have more holes on it to cut different size screws, which I use quite often actually. Today. These are Lyman Pliers, which these are the standard version of these. Kleins. And you know what's funny is, in the trade, these are called Kleins, but they're made by Klein. Somebody says, give me a pair of Kleins, that's what they're talking about. Cut the wire. There's an art to it, you can do it, you're not supposed to, but you know, if you talk the right way, you can do it. You can strip the wire, and you make the joint up with it, so when you twist the wires together, you put the wire nut on there. These are something, as an electrician, that you will use. These are your everyday, you're not going to be able to do your job without these. And this would come in handy. It's good to have. This is a scratch-all. Does anybody know what a scratch-all is? Let's just say, especially in a commercial application, our panel can come smooth. You have to cut your own holes. And sometimes you're going to have to cut multiple connectors in. And you want them to look nice, especially if it's exposed. So when you measure, you make sure your drill bit is going to be exactly where. So what you take this, and you take your Kleins, not your hammer, and you bang it on there. and it makes that little divot. So now you can take your drill bit, it's gonna hold it in place. You do each little mark. So now your drill bit's gonna stay exactly perfect where it needs to be. A chisel. I'm sure everybody knows what a chisel does.
Concrete, you can chisel out concrete,
Wood?
put boxes in the wall, you can use it for, use it to take heads off of nails.
Or something's been concreted over and you need to get it out without destroying the product. You chip the concrete around it. Again, you use the Kleins. In the electrical, which I'll bring in some fittings to show you guys, in order to have a coupling, which a coupling is a fitting that couplings two pieces of conduit together. It either has two screws, or in some applications for a weatherproof application, or more of a airtight type of situation, you would grab the wrong tool. You would take two pairs of channel locks, because instead of screws, it has a compression, which means there's two bolts on the outside, two big nuts. And as it screws down, it compresses onto a ring, which makes it more of an airtight situation, which is good for, if you got a run that's a couple 100 feet long, you want something a little bit more airtight. Because, you gotta think, if I'm running a conduit, especially underground, 5, 6, 1,200 feet long, how am I gonna get something from point A to point B to be able to pull my wire? Does anybody know? They call it jet line, thousands of feet of twine. And they have little mouses that you can put on there, but to me what works the best is a grocery bag. You take a shop vac on one end, and you put that thing on the other end. Oh, wow. It sucks that string right in, tie your rope on there, and you pull your wire in.
Okay, explain to me what you mean by fully loaded on a lighting circuit.
With fully loaded, what means, is everybody knows what a breaker is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, breakers come in 15 minimum, 20, 25, 30, 40, and so on. So basically a house breaker is basically a basic circuit is 15 or 20 amps. And what is amperage? Amperage is basically the measurement of resistance. And resistance is what? Heat, load. So I take a piece of wire, I hook it to my breaker, I put my outlet on there, I plug in a refrigerator. Refrigerator is good for about 7 amps. Now I have 13 amps left on my 20 amp load. I plug in you shouldn't plug in anything else, but I'm using this to a refrigerator. I'm using this as an example. So now I plug in my radio or my stereo or my blender or my fan, and basically it'll go until you basically have 20 amps of resistance. And you guys have to understand what a code book does. It teaches you how to balance out the electric, because like I said, electric is basically mathematical formulas. Mathematical formula how to balance resistance. And that's some of the stuff we'll go over. But you have to understand, if that light is overloading that circuit, there's a wire that reaches up into a box, and that piece of wire goes all the way through the ceiling and goes all the way to that panel and retouches that breaker. Well, that breaker trips at the amount of resistance, which is heat. So that amount, that balance calculate, that overload of heat will trip that breaker. So it means basically that heat has to travel all the way through that wire and get hot enough to trip that breaker. And guys, that's where the fire starts. Because if you unbalance something and for some reason you don't hook it up right, or don't hook up your neutrals right, which we'll talk about, and that breaker doesn't trip, you overload that wire. You have that amount of heat in that ceiling, fire. And you got to remember, especially in houses, our company, we've made the decision to really not get involved in the housing market, because I don't want to get involved in that cookie cutter, getting those houses done, because I like to know the homeowner. I like to see, at least put my name to something. I don't want to have a company that 25 years from now, they're going to say, how come that switch is not over there? How come this is not working over there? Because Anybody can wire a wire from a switch to a plug, to an outlet, to a breaker, to a thing, here, to there, to there. You know, but I prefer to be involved in the design into things, into the larger stuff, the stuff where you actually have to kind of put your brain to it. But for example, back to this tool thing, remember I told you about the flex, or the flex cutter, which there's a thing called MC. Does anybody know what MC is, or BX? Basically, it's a pre-manufactured 3/8 flex that comes in 250-foot rolls, and it's so this is what you would use for the MC. You would carry this. Yeah, this is an MC BX cutter. We'll bring some of that in so you can see. Well, you got to learn how to make that joint, but you got to think. Everybody likes to stretch it on there, and it gets hot, and what happens? Shrinks back and falls off and lose the integrity. Give it a little stretch when you start, a little bit, and just wrap it kind of tight, and then rub it on there, real good. Get it, cut it off, and that's how you use black tape. Well, all the common uses, we would use it to, when we pull wire, make our head, as you'll see, put our wires together, make a nice clean head so when it slides to the pipe, it's nice and contoured. You'd make it, if you get a little splice or a nick in a piece of wire, put that on there. In some applications, you would use black tape and not a wire nut, or sometimes, got another one for you. A lot of people, there's an art to it, easy. When you twist the wires together, everybody sometimes they think, I'm gonna put black tape on top of the wire nut. Just take black tape, put it just like that. Wrap it around that little bit right there, cut it, and twist it. And that's it. That's it forever. Start over. You have a box with multiple circuits that have multiple outlets. So they touch, you're gonna get an explosion. So you'd wanna wrap it around it, just to isolate those, just in case something touches. As today's just kind of an introduction class. I think next week what we're gonna be, I'll bring in some pipe, and we'll bring in the bender. Try to bring in a couple of benders, and we'll teach you guys how to bend pipe, which...
Romex first. Right?
Yes, cancel that, sorry. We're gonna go with the Romex and the MC, teach you guys the basics of running MC and Romex, and how to make the joints, and how to strap, and how to make it look clean, and be a nice professional job. Anybody know what this is?
Gonna get some, so you can see.
Okay.
Got it outside?
It's not a tester, it's a sensor. But you have to understand, sometimes this could sense something, voltage, or some kind of resistance on the neutral or the ground. This is the, I better get my tester. Or, hey, turn the switch off, or turn the breaker on, beep, 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 that's it. Do not trust your life to this. If I never see you again, and you guys all become electricians, or AC guys, or mess with wires, this does not verify voltage. This senses activity in the wires.
What did you call it?
A electrical sensor, a meter. Of course, this is about one that I would say, hey, voltage is off, I can touch the wire. Fluke is the Mercedes of testers. There is no better. And this tests voltage, which to let you know, is there power, is there not power, it's safe to go in. Tests continuity. Does anybody know what continuity is? But the completion of the circuit basically is continuity. Let's just say that I go into a building and there is a box on this end of the building and there's a box on that end of the building, and it's got 11 black wires and 1 green wire. There's no markings on the wire. How do I know that when I hook up to that end on that black, that I'm on the same wire on that end? What I would do is, I would strip them all out, of course. I would take this, touch this to the green. I would touch this to one of the black wires. And when my partner goes to the other end, he'd start touching the wires to the green. And when that one wire touches and senses off the tester, we know that we're on the same exact wire because we have continuity. We mark that number 1. Go to the green wire. Touch the next one. Beep. I got that one. That's number 2. Number 2. And then we'll know. So now we know that number 1 on that wire is number on this side, number 1 on that side. So this one in particular, you can test AC and DC, which is cool. You can test like 12-volt stuff and resistance and your vehicle and stuff. And also it tests amperage. You guys use it? This is an amp probe. You know what that is? Anybody know what an amp probe is? An amp probe is, let's just say that I'm like, oh wow, this 20 amp breaker keeps tripping. Why does it keep tripping? It must be overloaded. Well, let me pull out my amp probe and put it on ampacity. I wrap my tester around the wire, and I say, okay, let's turn that on. Oh man, it reads 22.3. Well, no wonder it's tripping. There's too much stuff on that circuit. We need to get that thing down to 17 amps. Because technically by code, you shouldn't load anything up to more than 80%. This right here, which by the way I just recently found out, I was like, that's cool, I didn't even know I had that. It does this. So it senses, tests, does continuity, and ampacity. Again, one tool. This, anybody ever use one of these? Basically what this does is when you plug this into an amp, a lot of home inspectors use this. And inspectors use this. You'll plug this into an outlet, and what it does is it'll light up 2, and right here it'll say, oh, okay, I'm blind, so we'll go with it, I'll make up my own. It'll say, oh, the 2 on the left light up together, that means correct. If these 2 on the ones on the end, it could say open neutral or open ground, or it's hooked up reverse with a hot and a neutral. It's hooked up wrong. So this will kind of tell you if your outlet and your wiring is correct on your outlet or receptacle, which is another word for it.
What was that called? That you plug into the wall?
An outlet tester, plug tester. Frog tester, which I've never heard that term ever, but apparently.
So,
Say a frog
mold,
tester?
mold, mold. Give me a frog tester. You're gonna go get MC on that?
Anybody know what this is? This is Romex.
That's which one. What you have wires, okay? And this is the one I was telling you about earlier that comes all set up with the wires in it. Each one of these is called THHN. It's an individually sheathed wire inside, okay? Inside Romex, you have 2 sheathed and 1 unsheathed. Your unsheathed in Romex is bare copper, which is your ground. In MC or BX, it's green. Everything in BX, because this is a metal jacket, everything has to be insulated inside of it. Whereas this, which is Romex, this is your sheathing, this is your non-metallic base. And that's what, if you ever looked at Romex a lot of times, you lay it out, and it'll say in here, Romex brand, simple, which is the name brand, covered and made by US patent, blah, blah, blah. And it usually has on it, I didn't cut that part off, there it is. It's on the back, it's imprinted. AWG on your wire. AWG is a American wire gauge. okay? Your wire gauge is in, what, 18, 16, 14, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4.
How do you strip this? Take this is an MC splitter.
Move back. Everybody see.
Put that in there. This actually has a little blade on it, so when you spin this, put the blade on there, put that in there, it got a blade and it spins it, right? I'm gonna make 2 cuts on this, so I'm gonna do it small. So you put that on there, tighten that down. Pull that out. Glass you see it. And there you go. And then you can see this is called an anti-short. So put that. I really need to wear my glasses. Put that on there like that. Shove that in there. Put the connector on there. Anti-short. So that way the wires don't short out on the piece of metal that you just cut because it's going to be sharp because you just cut it. Or break. Cut. Split.
If you notice, this is yellow. Years ago, all the wire Romex was all white. This is a 12 wire. This will go to a 20 amp breaker. If you buy the white, that's for a 15 amp breaker. That's your difference in color code. White is 15, lighter weight, and this is the heavier weight for 20 amp.